Donald Trump has been telling reporters that an armada of U.S. Navy vessels is heading towards Iran. The revelation comes as the president renewed warnings to Tehran against killing protesters or restarting its nuclear program. We have a big force going toward Iran. I stopped 837 hangings. If you hang those people, you're going to be hit harder than you've ever been hit. It'll make what we did to your Iran nuclear program look like peanuts. The USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier just went dark while transiting toward Iran, and the world is holding its breath. The nuclear-powered supercarrier crossed the Strait of Malacca and entered the Bay of Bengal, but then turned off its transponder and is now traveling dark, according to marinetraffic.com monitoring systems. Think about what that means. A 100,000-ton aircraft carrier carrying 90 combat aircraft just disappeared from tracking systems while heading towards a strike position against Iran. That's deliberate operational security, indicating imminent military action. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group was redirected from the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East amid Iran's internal unrest. The Pentagon ordered the redeployment as Tehran's crackdown on protesters killed thousands and Trump threatened intervention. Satellite imagery captured by Copernicus detected the Lincoln making a westward turn in the South China Sea on January 15th. The Carrier Strike Group includes a flagship USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, with 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, USS Spruance, USS Michael Murphy, and USS Frank E. Peterson, Jr. Think about the firepower moving into position. Carrier Air Wing 9, embarked on the Lincoln, consists of 8 squadrons flying F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters, F divided by -18E divided by F Super Hornets, EA 18G Growlers electronic warfare jets, E-2D Hawkeyes, CMV, 22B Ospreys, and MH-60 RC Hawks. The F-35C aircraft from Marine Fighter Attack Squadron VMFA 314, Navy F/A 18 Super Hornet fighters, and EA 18G Growler electronic attack aircraft can jam and strike Iranian air defenses. That's the exact capability package needed to suppress Iran's rebuilt defensive systems. A U.S. Navy fast-attack nuclear-powered submarine typically operates with carrier strike groups, though its identity is not disclosed for operational security. That means there's likely a Los Angeles or Virginia-class submarine with Tomahawk cruise missiles hunting alongside the Lincoln undetected. Ocean Trackers estimate the Lincoln remains approximately 3 to 5 days sailing from CENTCOM's area of responsibility, encompassing the Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf. That puts arrival around January 24 to 26, 2026. Perfect timing for coordinated strikes. 12 F-15E Strike Eagle fighter jets from RAF Lakenheath in England landed at Moffat Salta Air Base in Jordan over the past 24 hours. These are accompanied by 4 KC-135 Stratotanker aerial refueling jets, enabling extended strike missions deep into Iran. CENTCOM confirmed that a U.S. Air Force F-15E Strike Eagle assigned to the 494th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron landed at a base in the Middle East, stating, "The F-15's presence enhances combat readiness and promotes regional security and stability." Think about what F-15 Strike Eagles bring. These aircraft can carry 23,000 to 29,000 pounds of ordnance, far more than stealth F-35s. They were instrumental in defending against Iranian cruise missiles during June 2025's 12-day war. Now, the U.S. has 3 Strike Eagle squadrons in the region. According to open-source flight tracking, 17 Globemaster III cargo jets are flooding the region with increased flights to Diego Garcia and other bases. A strike would require an influx of air defense systems, material, and troops, exactly what heavy transports deliver. Reports indicate bombers landed at Diego Garcia, the joint U.S.-UK base with unusually long runways, enabling heavy strategic bombers like B-2 Spirit aircraft to launch long-range strike sorties. These can hit hardened underground targets that F-15s and F-18s cannot penetrate. Think about the layered strike package assembling. Stealth B-2 suppress deep underground nuclear facilities. F-35CS establish air superiority. 18G Growlers jam Iranian radars. F-15ES deliver massive conventional payloads. F/A-18 Super Hornets provide close air support. Tomahawk cruise missiles from destroyers and submarines saturate defenses. Unconfirmed reports suggest the USS George H.W. Bush carrier group also departed Norfolk on January 13th, heading to the region. That would add a second full carrier strike group with similar capabilities, doubling American air power. A former high-ranking U.S. military official stated, "It would be massive. First, we have to get forces there. Then we would need to stage and employ them. Then we need to sustain them. And we would have to be prepared to do all that for a long time. It would dwarf anything we have likely done in the recent past." Think about the scale being described. Larger than Iraq 2003, larger than Libya 2011, larger than Syria operations. This is full-spectrum conventional war preparation against a peer adversary with advanced air defenses, ballistic missiles, and regional proxy networks. Trump told advisors that if the United States takes military action in Iran, he wanted to deliver swift and decisive results, avoiding prolonged conflict. That means overwhelming initial strikes designed to cripple Iran's ability to sustain operations. Multiple regional and American media accounts report U.S. carrier movements, bomber activity at Diego Garcia, and reinforced air defenses across the Gulf as officials coordinate contingency planning for Iranian retaliation. The Pentagon was expected to surge additional assets, including possibly more aircraft carrier strike groups accompanied by cruisers and missile destroyers. The added firepower serves as a deterrent, but also gives Trump additional options if he chooses strikes. Several sources said there have been long-running concerns among U.S. officials that the military didn't have the right mix of assets in place to protect against a potential massive retaliatory strike from Iran, given that Trump surged much military force to the Caribbean supporting the Venezuela operation. That's why the carrier deployment is critical. Trump captured Venezuelan President Maduro on January 3rd, diverting significant assets. Now those forces must reposition, while simultaneously building up Middle East presence. The logistics are staggering. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu informed the U.S. that Israel was not prepared to defend itself in the event of an Iranian response to an American strike, given the U.S. military lacked sufficient forces in the region to assist, as it had done during the June 2025 war. Think about Israel's vulnerability. Tehran fired missiles killing 32 Israelis during the last conflict. Iran also targeted Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, where 10,000 American troops are stationed. Both know Iran will retaliate massively if Trump strikes. That's why reinforcements are essential. Reports grew that non-essential British and American personnel were evacuated from Al Udeid Base in Qatar, supporting a potential Iran operation. That's the clearest indicator that strikes are imminent. You don't evacuate unless an attack is coming. The U.S. military reinforced Patriot and THAAD batteries across Gulf states as part of preparations for an Iranian response. Washington tightened and augmented joint command centers with regional partners, including Israel. Think about the defensive preparations. Iran has thousands of ballistic missiles that can reach Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Israel. Every American base and allied capital needs layered missile defense before strikes begin. IDF Operations Directorate, Planning Directorate, and Israel's defense attaches intensified contact with CENTCOM and the Pentagon over the past 2 days, preparing for multiple scenarios. 3 new F-35I Adir stealth fighters landed at Nevatim Air Base, strengthening Israel's multi-layered defense posture. Social media reports noted GPS disruptions over Iranian airspace and apparent use of electronic warfare intended to test systems, degrading Iranian radars and sensors. That's reconnaissance preparing the battlefield, jamming tests before actual operations. Think about what Iran sees developing. A massive American carrier strike group approaching, bombers at Diego Garcia, 3 F-15 squadrons in Jordan, evacuations from Qatar, air defenses reinforcing, electronic warfare testing. All signs pointing to an imminent attack. Trump stated repeatedly over the past week that Iran halted executions of citizens and postponed the hanging of hundreds of protesters. He framed this as why he didn't strike. But then military preparations intensified. Trump told reporters on January 16th, "Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself." You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact. But foreign outlets reported intensified covert preparations for a large-scale operation in the last 2 days. Think about the deception operation. Trump publicly claims Iran stopped killing protesters, so he's holding fire. Meanwhile, carrier groups deploy, bombers stage, fighters forward position, personnel evacuate bases. Classic misdirection before a surprise attack. American officials told the Jerusalem Post that all options are on the table now. They added the goal as creating a significant grouping in the region, providing Trump a wide range of options if he decides to strike Iran. The repositioning aligns with directives from CENTCOM to prepare for 24/7 major operational support over the next month as tensions with Iran reach a boiling point. That's sustained combat operations, not quick in-and-out strikes. Think about the sustained operations requirement. CENTCOM isn't preparing for a single night of bombing. They're establishing infrastructure for a month-long campaign that suggests targeting not just nuclear sites, but the entire IRGC command structure, missile arsenals, naval bases, and proxy networks. Trump's strike options run the gamut from surgical strikes on IRGC forces and basic paramilitary troops killing protesters to a decapitation strike on Ayatollah Khamenei, to striking nuclear facilities again. Going after Iran's air defenses and short-range standoff weapons could make future operations less risky. The United States is repositioning significant naval and air assets to conduct coercive deterrence and signal readiness for potential intervention following Iranian internal unrest. Any direct military action faces a high risk of broad Iranian retaliation against U.S. bases in the Gulf, Israeli territory, and global energy infrastructure. Think about what happens when strikes begin. Iran immediately launches ballistic missiles at Al-Udeid, Al-Dhafra, Prince Sultan Air Base, and Camp Lemonnier. Hezbollah fires 150,000 rockets from Lebanon into Israel. Houthi rebels attack Saudi oil facilities and shipping in the Red Sea. Iraqi militias assault the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. External pressure or removal of top leadership could actually strengthen Iranian internal cohesion and empower hardline factions like the IRGC rather than fostering political moderation. That's a strategic paradox. Strikes might rally Iranians around the regime. Protests that began on December 28th over rising prices and a devalued currency appear to be dissipating in the wake of the regime's harsh response. Heavy police presence and deadly crackdowns have largely suppressed demonstrations, according to witnesses and human rights groups. Think about the irony. Trump threatened intervention to help protesters, but by the time the carrier arrives in strike position, protests have been crushed. So what's the justification for attack? Regime change? Nuclear program? Regional proxies? The mission keeps shifting. Conflict in the Gulf would have a pronounced impact on global oil and gas markets, driven by heightened risk of supply disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz and Red Sea. Disruptions to tanker traffic could prompt coordinated military responses from regional and allied powers. 20% of global oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz daily. Iran has threatened to close it if attacked. That would spike oil prices to $200 plus per barrel, triggering a global recession. Every country has an economic stake in preventing this war. Think about the diplomatic pressure building. Gulf Arab states, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Egypt all caution the U.S. against strikes. Russia and China warned at the UN Security Council that military action violates international law and risks catastrophic escalation. Cato Institute fellow John Hoffman warned that striking Iran risks entangling Washington in domestic upheaval without a clear endgame and endangering U.S. troops across the Middle East. Those clamoring for involvement will likely press for sustained engagement, ensuring the regime's demise, something the U.S. should avoid given its overextension abroad. But Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Daryl Caudle underscored that the U.S. Navy can reposition carrier strike groups globally in under 2 weeks, highlighting operational flexibility and strategic reach central to American maritime power projection. Think about the capability demonstration. Moving carriers from the South China Sea to the Persian Gulf in 10 days shows China and Russia that America can concentrate overwhelming force anywhere on Earth rapidly. That's deterrence through demonstration of capability. Both USS Theodore Roosevelt and USS George H.W. Bush left Norfolk within 48 hours from movements analysts suggest relate to heightened force posture requirements. Neither completed standard training exercises, underscoring the urgency. Three carrier strike groups, potentially converging on the Middle East, represents the largest American naval concentration since the Iraq invasion of 2003. Combined with bomber task forces and forward-deployed fighter wings, this creates a strike package capable of sustained operations against hardened targets across Iran. The arrival of a full carrier strike group provides a unique combination of sustained air power, electronic warfare, maritime strike capabilities, and sea control unmatched by other platforms. It's a floating air base generating 150-plus sorties daily for weeks. Think about what Iran must do now. Activate all air defense batteries, disperse ballistic missiles to harden mount facilities, alert proxy forces across the region, prepare retaliatory strikes, shut down the internet preventing coordination with protesters, hunker down and wait for the American blow. The bottom line is this. Iran is scrambling as the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier enters strike position, and the world is on edge watching the most dangerous military confrontation in years develop in real time. The nuclear-powered supercarrier crossed the Strait of Malacca, entered the Bay of Bengal, then went dark, turning off its transponder while heading toward the strike position. That a 100,000-ton vessel carrying 90 combat aircraft disappearing from tracking deliberately. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group includes 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, a nuclear attack submarine, and Carrier Air Wing 9 with F-35C stealth fighters, F/A-18 Super Hornets, and EA-18G Growlers, arriving in strike range January 24 to 26. 12 F-15E Strike Eagles from RAF Lakenheath landed in Jordan with KC-135 tankers. 3 Strike Eagle squadrons are now positioned. Bomber stage at Diego Garcia. 17 transports are flooding the region with equipment. Unconfirmed report of the USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Group also heading to the region would add a second full strike group, doubling air power and potentially creating the largest naval concentration since Iraq 2003. Trump wants swift and decisive results, avoiding prolonged conflict, meaning overwhelming initial strikes crippling Iran's operational capacity. Non-essential personnel have been evacuated from Al Udeid, Qatar. Patriot and THAAD batteries are reinforced across the Gulf. Command centers are augmented. GPS disruptions and electronic warfare testing over Iran, all indicators of an imminent attack. Netanyahu informed the U.S. that Israel is not prepared to defend against Iranian retaliation without adequate American support, hence the massive force buildup. Strike options include surgical IRGC targets, decapitation of Khamenei, nuclear facilities, air defenses, or a comprehensive campaign against military infrastructure and proxy networks. Any direct action faces high risk of broad Iranian retaliation against U.S. bases, Israeli territory, and global energy infrastructure in the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil transits daily. Gulf states, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Egypt warn against strikes. Russia and China condemned intervention at the UN Security Council, but the carrier keeps advancing. Protests that triggered the crisis are now dissipating under the regime's crackdown, leaving questionable justification for military action. The mission is unclear. Regime change, nuclear program. Supporting protesters already defeated? Global economic stakes are massive. Strait of Hormuz closure would spike oil to $200 plus per barrel, triggering a worldwide recession. Every nation has an interest in preventing this war. Yet 3 carrier groups, bomber task forces, fighter squadrons, missile defense batteries, and evacuations all point to strikes coming within days, not weeks. The USS Abraham Lincoln is traveling dark somewhere in the Bay of Bengal, advancing toward the Persian Gulf. F-15s in Jordan are ready. Bombers at Diego Garcia are armed. Electronic warfare is testing Iranian defenses. Personnel have been evacuated from likely retaliation targets. The world is watching. Markets are nervous. Oil prices are rising. Allies are cautioning restraint. Adversaries are warning of catastrophe. Iran is scrambling defensive preparations. America is positioning overwhelming force. Everything indicates the largest Middle East military operation since the Iraq invasion of 2003 could begin the moment the Abraham Lincoln enters the Arabian Sea. Whether Trump orders an attack or this remains coercive deterrence will determine if 2026 sees regional war or tense standoff. One thing is certain. The world is on edge as an American supercarrier steams toward a strike position against Iran. The next 72 hours could change everything.